So next up, we will hear from Ennio Prizzi, who is Senior Policy Officer with Bioenergy Europe, and we're delighted that he has travelled from Brussels to be with us this morning. And the title of his presentation will be The Regulatory Insights Understanding the Bio-Based Carbon Removals Landscape. And carbon removals area covers both all of the biofuel sectors indeed, with huge potential for solid biomass for carbon removals, but also for biomethane in terms of CO2 production from biomethane upgrading, and how that can then be sequestered or used from the point of view of removing carbon from the atmosphere. So Ennio is the Senior Policy Officer, as I said, with Bioenergy Europe. He engages closely with the European institutions and stakeholders to provide analysis and policy background and recommendations that foster investment and regulatory clarity for the bioenergy sector. He has a legal background and more than 5 years of professional experience in EU affairs, with expertise spanning public affairs, project management and policy research in the fields of climate action, innovation and sustainable development. He coordinates the working group on the carbon dioxide removals, a forum where Bioenergy Europe members analyse policy options for development of bio-based carbon removal technologies. We're delighted you could make it here today, and we look forward to your presentation. And IrBEA is a proud member of Bioenergy Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. And congrats also to all the team of the Irish Bioenergy Association for the great job you have done with the conference organization. Well, again, I'm Ennio Prizzi. I'm Senior Policy Officer at Bioenergy Europe, and today I'm going to guide you through actually the way forward for the bioenergy industry. I'm discussing about bio-based carbon removals, and especially we're going to focus on regulatory aspects in the EU climate agenda. Few information about Bioenergy Europe. We are the voice of the bioenergy industry back in Brussels. We represent almost 180 members covering the entire solid biomass value chain, from raw material producers to heat and electricity generators. We have also 7 different working groups, and as Sean was saying, I'm coordinating our internal working group on carbon dioxide removals. It's basically a forum where we explore policy options for the deployment and development of bio-based carbon removals. I'm going to start with providing some background information on the EU climate policy, and then we are going to move to the EU CRCF regulation, the carbon removal and carbon farming certification framework, the building block in the EU climate policy for bio-based carbon removals. Well, maybe most of you are already familiar with after the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, the European Union has committed to ambitious environmental climate target, including reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and reaching also climate neutrality by 2050. But the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, clearly states it is very unlikely to actually reduce our global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius unless we drastically cut our greenhouse gas emissions. But indeed, there will still be some unavoidable emissions, especially from sectors like agriculture, aviation, or the energy-intensive industry, for which carbon removals will need to compensate. So it is pretty much clear that if we want to reach our climate goals, we need both. We need emission reduction on one side, but we need also to double our carbon removal capacity on the other side. And here we are for the actually carbon removal certification framework, the CRCF. Basically, the European Commission back in November 2022 decided to actually propose this piece of legislation to regulate actually the new market of carbon removals in Europe. So we're going to go through the main goals of the technologies, and then also what types of carbon removals are covered under the CRCF, and especially how the certification process will work in practice. Well, what are the main goals of the CRCF? Well, basically, the CRCF is planning to, in a way, scale up and also facilitate the deployment and the development of CDR technologies in the EU, while also avoiding greenwashing and create also a new market for carbon removal technologies. I believe actually that this IRCF is the most exciting and probably the only one piece of legislation in Europe, but maybe globally, to actually regulate bio-based carbon removals right now. And it will be actually the building block for the EU climate policy. What types of carbon removals are covered under this IRCF? You can find three broad range of different carbon removal activities. The first one is permanent carbon removals. It means, a broad range of industrial technologies able to capture the CO2 from the atmosphere and store the CO2 underground permanently for several centuries. While when we discuss about permanent carbon removals, as Sean was saying, we are referring to like a specific list of technologies. First of all, BECS, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. Then BCR, biochar carbon removal. DACS, direct air carbon capture and storage. But overall, right now, in the legal text of this IRCF and in all the secondary legislation, we are referring more often to bio-CCS. So overall, to all the different technologies that are able to capture biogenic CO2 and store it underground. It means, that we can apply CCS to biogas installations, but also to the waste-to-energy plant, also to industrial application as the cement and lime industry, and they're actually seeing a great potential for bio-CCS. The second one is carbon storage in products. Well, we are referring to a broad range of actually products like wood-based construction material or insulation materials that are able to capture the CO2. And in this case, the European Commission states that carbon can be stored at least for 35 years. While, for permanent carbon removals, carbon can be stored, according to the European Commission, at least for 200 years. And the last one, many of you are familiar, is the carbon farming section. Basically, here we are referring generally on basically all the practices and processes on agricultural land, on forests, or also coastal environment that are able to basically sequester the CO2 through biological processes, while also providing some like added value, in a way to biodiversity. And in this case, for carbon farming, the European Commission states that carbon can be stored at least for 5 years. So basically, okay, now we know what kind of activities are covered under this IRCF. But okay, let's think about, I'm an operator. Actually, okay, I'm seeking for certification, what I should do. Well, indeed, like activities covered under this IRCF to be certified, they need basically to comply with the so-called quality criteria. Quality is an acronym for quantification, additionality, long-term storage, and sustainability. It means, that the activity covered under the IRCF, they need to comply with all of them. On top of this, the European Commission, to actually operationalize the quality criteria, is developing right now EU certification methodologies. Many of you are for sure familiar with the certification process for the sustainability of biomass. Well, it's going to work more or less on the same way. Actually, the European Commission is relying a lot on best practices under the certification scheme for the sustainability of biomass. It means, again, a certain type of activity covered under this IRCF. To be certified, I need to comply with the quality criteria and the EU-related certification methodologies. Who is drafting these certification methodologies? The European Commission, with the help of an expert group on carbon removals. In the expert group, we can find more or less 70 members among civil society, NGOs, industry representatives, and also voluntary schemes. So how is going to work then the certification process in practice? Basically, I'm an operator, I'm looking for a certification, so I will apply to a voluntary scheme or public or private already approved by the European Commission. What is going to happen before actually the starting of the certification process? The operator will basically provide a monitoring plan and an activity plan of the carbon removal activity. Then it will be a certification body appointed by the certification scheme that is going to basically run a certification audit. After the end of the certification audit, if of course it's successful, basically the carbon removal, the operator will receive a certificate of compliance. What's going to happen next? Well, basically all the information related to the carbon removal activity will be added to a CRCF registry that will be made public. But and it will be operational by 2028. Until then, every voluntary scheme will basically list all the information publicly in their website. So we saw basically what kind of activity are covered under the CRCF and how operators can be certified. But where are we now? Because as I said, this legislative process started basically in November 2022. Well, I'm going to skip, the decision making process, lucky for you. We can actually where we are now. As I was saying, the Commission proposal was back in 2022. Right now we are actually at the end of 2024, co-legislators, the European Parliament and the Council reached an agreement on the same legal text. So now we are in the so-called implementation phase. Right now the European Commission is drafting certification methodologies. In this way, by 2026, operators can be certified under the CRCF. It means basically that we're going to have the first carbon removal units certified under the CRCF. And again, a bit more like a detail. Here you can see actually all the different work has been done, especially for the certification methodologies. There will be, for example, the 10th of November, the next expert group on carbon removals. Stakeholders provided, including, for example, Bioenergy Europe, we provided our feedback on the draft delegated act about the certification methodologies on how to certify bio-CCS and biochar carbon removal. So now the European Commission is collecting all this feedback, and there will be the next expert group at the beginning of November. And what is the plan? The plan is to basically publish the delegated act by the end of this year. Again, in this way, operators can be certified starting from 2026. But why, I really like, the basically the title of this conference today, because okay, we are discussing about potential of the industry now. But basically bio-based carbon removal is the way forward for the bioenergy industry. Indeed, there are a lot of many potential new market for the bioenergy installations. But why actually is important for us? This CRCF is important because indeed something we've been worked a lot all along the legislative process was basically not having new layers of sustainability for a biomass raw material. Indeed, you worked a lot to calling for consistency among different pieces of legislation, especially between renewable energy, the directive, and the CRCF. As you will know, all the sustainability and greenhouse gas emission criteria are listed in Article 29 of the Renewable Energy Directive, and we always call for having consistency. It means that all the biomass raw material used in a carbon removal activity, they don't need basically to demonstrate again compliance with the sustainability criteria, but just needed to demonstrate compliance according to the RED III directive. And this was actually fundamental for our industry, to avoiding actually new administrative burdens for the industry to demonstrate again compliance basically twice. Indeed, right now we are we've been following a lot the discussion for the supply side. So for operators generating carbon credits, carbon removals, I'm thinking like a CHP plant, power-only installations, but also biogas installations. Right now we are moving also from the buyer's perspective. So how operators can make profits from carbon removal credits. and indeed, who can buy, those credits on the voluntary carbon market. So we are also very much focusing also on the demand side from the buyer's perspective. Last point, important, the starting point was the CRCF, but right now in Brussels we are discussing about permanent carbon removal, so bio-CCS and biochar in the different strategies and pieces of legislation. I'm thinking, for example, to the revision of the EU climate law. The EU climate law, for example, is a law that set a binding target for member states to reach climate neutrality by 2050. And right now we are discussing of a possible inclusion of permanent carbon removals there. Or we will discuss for sure of permanent carbon removals in the future revision of the EU ETS that will be basically happening like next year. So indeed we are discussing if and when including the carbon removal credits into the EU ETS system. And indeed there was also a lot of discussion for the Green Claims Directive that now actually was postponed, especially on how buyers can use those, can claim those carbon removal credits. So as you can see, a lot is going on in Brussels. This topic is actually becoming like a fundamental, especially from a climate perspective. And indeed, it shows how, our industry is evolving over time and how, it's not just related to energy production, but how we can combine both energy production, renewable energy production on the one side, and also we are able to deliver negative emissions on the other side. So thank you for your attention, and willing to take any questions during the break.
Thanks very much, Ennio, for your presentation, and indeed to give us a very valuable insight into the work you're doing at a European level around carbon dioxide removals